welcome back. Now, with this, we also would like to discuss some of the misconceptions. If you talk about this is required, because what happens is pretty soon we all get into this kind of confusion with the DSS, right. So, one of the misconceptions associated with the DSS is that DSS is needed only at the top levels, okay. Only the top level management is required, okay. Yes, though DSS started with this intention, okay. When the original evolution happened, it was intended to deal with the top levels and also driven by the existence of mainframe systems, okay. So, it was very expensive, computers were extremely expensive and there is no other way you could do it. So, you ended up doing it specifically limited for top management. Now, in this regard, the main aspect is this is wrong now, okay. This assumption is not true, okay. It is required at all levels of management in an organization, okay. And that is one of the reasons, since it is in the all level of organization, this was primarily driven by the advent of web based systems. When the web based decision support systems came into picture, okay, the extension of the DSS to all different levels of the management was easy to do that, okay. So, then the second one is DSS is independent, okay. This is wrong again, it is no longer independent, okay, because decision making at several levels must be coordinated and hence communication at all levels is a must, okay. Now, most of the decision is coordinated at several levels, okay. The production department does not make a decision by itself, it actually coordinates it with the finance department and marketing department, and hence this communication at all levels is very critical for the system in this regard, okay. So, the DSS is not independent, it allows for coordinated stuff, and DSSing is the only thing the top managers need from the IS or the information system, okay. This is again a wrong, if you assume that I have a DSS, then I am done, right. This is wrong again, okay. I would call this wrong again, because decision making is only one of the activities, it is only one of the activities of managers that benefit from the information systems support. Now, information support can also be used for like driving innovation, cross interdepartmental collaboration and all those kind of things. That is something that is part of the information system. So, DSS is not just the only function of information system, it can be there for other reasons as well, okay. So, the acceptance of the DSS technology, okay. If you now look into it, this is reasonably quick and easy way for us to do this. If you look into the slide, the major change on this one is the shift from mainframe to powerful personal computers. This is one of the reasons why the DSS technology is become more and more acceptable, right. So, the desktop computing is making technology usable and portable, right. So, earlier before the, so like for example, in the USS, in the United States USA, now in if you take a murder case, okay, in a judicial system, there is a murder. From the start of this, okay, the sentencing process, okay, the start of the trial and everything, it completes within 6 months in United States. In India, you know how many years it will take. It may take 6 to 7 years the minimum. So, the decision support system, the judicial decision support system they were been able to develop and use within their system has able to allow them to make rapid decisions as part of it. Then the second part is the more and more friendly packages for the novice users started coming into picture. So, like languages like PHP, Python, etc., Perl, etc., came into picture, which came up with more computation power, rapid computation power using the web based interface. And hence, what happens is, even for the novice users, applying a complicated neural net or something to come up with a decision is become much more of an easy job. And hence, if you look into it, fewer upper level managers experience the computer anxiety. So, many of the upper level managers are also tech savvy, unlike the earlier days. And because why their computer anxiety is reduced, because the software is usually written in a way to accomplish the task with minimal interaction. Lot of the people, some people say that when you design something with 3 to 5 clicks and somebody can get it done in 3 to 5 clicks, then it's actually an ideal system and people will tend to use it in a very good fashion, etc. Okay. And also the third part is the cost of not using the technology is getting very high. Okay. So, if you do not use the technology and if you do not make the timely decision, it also has become a very big impact. So, in 1990s, the average time for obsolescence in the computer technology was 2 years. So, if you buy a laptop in 1990s, 2 to 3 years that laptop will be fresh and then slowly degrade. So, 5 to 6 years you would be happily able to use the laptop. Whereas, now when talk to in 2020s, the average time was reduced to something like 4 months. Let us say 4 to 6 months, and maybe in a year you see that a much better computer has come into picture, and then now you are like, I am now become obsolete in that regard. Okay. And then the last part of it is the amount of information to be processed is huge. Okay. Why? What happened? Well, the reason is this. Number one, storage has become cheaper. Okay. Earlier we used floppy disks or zip disks and smaller hard disks. Okay. Now, large and fast hard disks, solid state device, what we call as SSD, okay, then pen drives, etc. So, all these things have helped. Okay. So, and the storage has become cheaper. Okay. So, when the storage has become cheaper, tendency to store all data, okay, no segregation and removal of unwanted, or I am using the term unwanted or irrelevant data. Okay. So, we store everything, we just take it, okay, storage has become cheaper. So, let us just store everything in one go. Okay. So, then once you do that, then what happens is finding relevant information has become a challenge. Okay. That is the one aspect of this. Okay. The amount of information processed has become huge, because you keep on storing and then we go from there. Okay. So, that is why you probably give an acceptance of DSS technology, how this is being accepted and stuff like that. Now, let us talk about the components of DSS. Okay. Let us look into this slide and the major components of DSS. So, up to this point we have been talking about the details of the DSS, and now we are going to talk about the the integral parts of the DSS. Okay. The first thing is the database management system. Okay. DBMS is very popularly known as. Okay. And the main function is, okay, how the data is collected, stored and processed. Okay. This is the first part of it, right. So, the main intention is, the main primary question is how is the data collected, stored and processed. Okay. So, this is the DBMS answers that part of it. So, we have it allows for access to data and control programs that need to get any data. Okay. If a program wants to get any data, okay, it will come to the DBMS and say, I want this particular data, please provide me with the data, and the system actually gives you the access to the data. The second one is the model based management system, MBMS, right. So, this fundamental question here is how to build, manage and integrate decision support models. Okay. The primary question here is how would you build, manage and integrate decision support models. So, you may end up making linear regression model or a classification model or a decision tree model, there we may make too many models. So, how do you build them, then how do you integrate with the decision making process, and once you integrate, how do you manage them, which one to use, when and where, all those aspects are part of this. Okay. So, the main thing here is keeps track of all possible models that can be run during the analysis. So, when you are doing the analysis, okay, you try to find out, track all possible models, what are the possible models that can be used, and you can run it at the analysis, see the results and then make the decision based on it. Then comes the third component of it, which is the user interface. Okay. So, the user interface is tackles the question of how the user interacts with the system. Okay. So, this is the main aspect of it, right. How will the user interact with the system? Okay. In this case, allows for simple uncluttered UI that results in a pleasant user experience. Okay. So, the user should be motivated to interact with the decision support system and then make decisions accordingly. And the last part of it is what is called as the knowledge management system. Okay. Or some people call us knowledge based management system. Okay. How can the organizational or systemic knowledge be saved and reused? Okay. How can you capture this? How can you capture the systemic knowledge? Okay. And this could include the prior experiences, okay, specific inputs, collective wisdom, etc. These are things that are very important to the organization, and how can you collect them, get them together, and how can you take it forward from there. So, these are the major components of DSS as we discuss. And in the later coming lectures, we will be talking about each one of them in detail, not too much detail, but relevant detail, so that you have an idea of what it is and some basic working knowledge of it. So, that at the end, even if you have to design a decision support system, you would have enough know how to do it. So, let us look at the schematic of the DSS at this point. Okay. So, the DSS schematic. Okay. Let us try to draw in a way how the DSS how it interacts with the internal and the external world. Okay. So, typically we start with, there are many ways we can look into it. So, let us start with the user at the bottom, right. Okay. Let us call as the decision maker, okay, or in simple terms the user of the system. So, it could be a top decision maker, a lower level decision maker, whatever it is, right. That person will interact with the system, as we said earlier, using what is the user interface, the UI. Okay. So, UI is the way in which the user will interface with the system, and through the UI the user will interface with what we call as the knowledge base subsystems. Okay. So, then the UI will interact on behalf of the user with the knowledge base subsystem, and the UI will also interact with the user on what we call as the decision models. Okay. Okay. The UI will interact with the decision models on behalf of the user, and the knowledge base subsystem will also interact with the decision models for its own purpose, whatever it is. And in between, then there is what we call as the model based management, system. Okay. This will interact with this one. It will be talking about creating and storing decision models that way, right. And the other one is the model based management system will also interact with what we call as the data management, okay, system, because both data and model base are required for this. Then the knowledge base system can also interact with the data management, and the user interface will also interact with the data management as part of this. Okay. And then there is something called as, we can think about it as, so this much part what we drew this, okay, this much part we can broadly call it as the DSS, okay, the major components of the DSS. Then we have what we call as the internet, intranet, extranet, etc. Okay. So, these are different ways you can interact with the external world as well, right. And you have something that allows you to other computer based systems. Okay. It could be a decision system, it could be something else. You could interact with them through that internet or intranet, something like that. Okay. And then you have is data at some place. Okay. It is usually you do not store data along with this. So, you have different types of data. Okay. Okay. Another data, and we take a third data as part of this, right, just as an example. Okay. So, the data management interacts with all the data systems like this, right. This data is both external data and it could also be internal data as well, both external and internal data, right. And finally, one last thing as part of this is there is a something called as a organizational knowledge, okay. Some specific knowledge that is part of the organization, which will be interacted with the knowledge based subsystem. Sometimes this is, most of the time we treat it outside the DSS, it is not interacted as part of it. So, the DSS is this one box that is within the red line, which contains the data management, model based management, decision models, knowledge based subsystem, user interface, etc. Then the decision maker, organization knowledge, data, etc. These kind of things are typically considered as external to the system. Okay. Now, with this, I guess we should be able to understand the major broad concepts of the DSS and how the DSS integrates with the user, with the external world, with the organization, with the organizational data, external data, internal data, all these aspects through its different components, and why this is very important and critical for long term decision making. I hope you guys have understood as part of this discussion. We will come back in the next session with more information on what are the type of decisions, what is the rationality in decisions, how each one of these components, whether it is the database management, model based management, or the knowledge based management, user interface, how each one of them, what are the salient features of them, and how would they interact in the totality to really make a final product is something that we will discuss as part of the coming lectures. Thank you very much for your patient listening. We will see you soon.